All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our October webinar. Jen, can you believe it is October, midweek October already?
No, it's not. It's Thursday afternoon.
Right? I was gonna say, just taking one day at a time right now. I feel like it just flipped over, the calendar just flipped over to October, and we're already halfway into it already. So, always fun.
Mid-October, post midweek.
True, true. I
Yeah.
like that. I like that look at it. Awesome. That's so good. All right. Well, you guys joined us for a really fun topic here today. This is one I think we all struggle with. It's called Decisions Made Easy, to help us make sure that we can have some sort of process to help take the subjectivity out of our decisions. Sometimes there's a lot of emotion around decisions. Sometimes it's around the leader who talks the loudest in the rooms that helps get the decisions done. I've watched that happen multiple times, even during this week, even that it does. Or it could be you're sitting around the house at night trying to figure out what do you want for dinner, or where are you going to go out for dinner that night. Or even funnier, sometimes when you go out for, let's say, a group dinner, when we can go do that again, when you're traveling with a group and everyone's like, well, I don't care, well, I don't care. Well, you can make those decisions a lot easier now, so we don't have to struggle with them going forward. So thanks for joining us for that today. It's going to be super fun. I love these concepts, use them all the time. So if you haven't been with us before, welcome. We are so glad to have you here. Jen and I co-founded Joint Pivot just almost about 2 years ago now. We are, I think, 2 weeks shy of our 2 week anniversary. So we are very excited for that. And we just love digging in there with our clients and solving problems, creating opportunities, whether we're training your team, whether we're coming in there doing the work with them, whatever it is that you need. Jen actually had somebody last week call me the Swiss Army knife of continuous improvement and problem solving. And I was like, oh, I kind of like that term. That is super fun. So
True.
yeah, that's what we do. Love it, love it. And Jen and I, you know us both. You probably have seen us enough already. I'm Julie. This is Jen. Obviously, two different sides of the Big Ten. Although Jen's team is doing much better than my football team is doing this year. So I don't know. You can have that. It's not been so great. I'll deal with
We'll
it.
see. We'll see.
It's fine. So give us a call anytime if you need any help doing this stuff, facilitating it, sitting down so your head can actually get in the participation and get in there in the progress that you're making, get in there in the discussion. Jen and I can help facilitate it so that you can really not have to worry about that. We can take that off your plate, help you with the doing aspect of it. Like we talked about training and teaching. Obviously, we love that as well. Getting in there, showing some of these concepts that sometimes can be a little bit boring and making them a little bit more fun and approachable. And then obviously love speaking out there and talking with people, sharing what it is that we know, and making sure that we're not kind of holding it all in here and getting it out to everybody else and sharing what we're learning. Because I know if you're like me, you've probably heard a lot of stuff from other people and you're thankful for those people who are sharing it. So if you need help anytime from speaking, keynotes, just motivating your team, maybe give us a call for that as well. So we are going to jump right into Decisions Made Easy today. And I've got this down to 4 steps here. And I love 4 steps. Identify your customers, define their needs, pick your best options, and then brainstorm your best solutions, then pick your best options. I did them in the wrong order there. But essentially 4 steps that we're going to be walking through. Easy tools that we can use. No templates needed. Just a couple review. If you've got a piece of paper in front of you, you can do this. So the first step of that is to figure out who your customers are. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is we assume that we know what our customers want. And that could be your kids if you're asking them what's for dinner. It could be your actual customers if you're talking about a business. It could be your shareholders, stakeholders, internal clients, anybody up and down the process in these cases, anybody who uses your products or services, or anybody who's impacted by your products or services, or anyone really who is going to be impacted by this decision are essentially your customers in these cases. You can probably bucket them into 3 of these buckets. If they're direct customers, they're actually receiving what it is that you're doing. If they're stakeholders that are influenced or affected by the changes that we might be making or whatever that decision is, or if they're internal clients. So anybody within kind of the organization, maybe within your family, that their ability to be able to perform. Depends on what this decision is. Maybe they don't receive the product directly, but they're impacted and they're internal within your org or your family. So those are the 3 different buckets of people that we usually deal with. So how do we figure out what exactly it is that they want? What are those customer requirements, the voice of customer we actually need to get? It sounds silly, but we don't do it most of the time, is to ask the customer. A lot of the times we do think we know best in these cases.
We
Sometimes
know. I was just gonna say.
we do know. I'm like,
I was just
come on,
gonna
don't we
say
know?
we know, don't we know?
Right. And you know what? There is every once in a while where it does feel like we're going out there and basically just validating what we thought. And if that's the case, awesome. There has never been an instance in my 20 some years of doing this that I've gone out to validate customer requirements and I knew every single one of them. Or there wasn't this little tidbit that I didn't think about that we needed to be able to address. So there has always been value in going back and talking to the customer. Now, sometimes this can be difficult. If you're going out there to go talk to your customers, you need to not BCDE, which is you're blaming, complaining, defending, and explaining. So if you're going to go out there and ask questions, I always joke it's the mouth closed and ears up. Oh, you can't even see it that well here. Mouth closed and ears up. You want to make sure that you're listening in that case and you're hearing everything that they have to say. I want you to listen to understand instead of listening to respond, because your role there is not to defend what they're saying or explain or, hey, did you know this? It is there purely to listen and understand why they're saying what they're saying. And we learn these different items when we ask them. I call them the wins questions. And that's their wants, interests, and needs. So the first one in there is, what do you like about our product or service? I always like to start it off in a really good positive tone, because if you start off with what don't you like, then it just goes downhill from there. So at least you like a little bit up on the roller coaster before you start talking about the things you don't like. So talk with them about what is their criteria. What do you actually need? What do you like about this? Then you can ask them the question on, what problems do you have with our product or service? And then you can start to ask them and get a little bit more detail on how important is that to you? Because it's important to understand, as we're asking these questions, we're listening as well. If we were to put them in our own buckets of like a want versus a need, or need to have, nice to have type, we want to start gathering in that information so we can start using it on the next tool. So be listening very, very careful for that, which is also why, again, we can't listen to try and explain. We really need to be listening in those cases so that we can use that information in the next step. The next question on there is a really interesting one of, what would you like to have that you're not getting? Because this actually forces the customers or the people that you're working with to explain maybe some of the delighters or opportunities that are out there for us to add more value, or maybe to understand what our competitors are offering or doing at that standpoint. It can really help us kind of uncover some of those little gold nuggets that are out there. I know that there are certain things sometimes when people ask me that, and I'll give them like an 8 out of 10 on a survey, and they'd be like, how can we do better? And I'm like, oh, shoot, like you actually can't. You can't. You already deliver everything I want you to be able to deliver, so why not a 10? So sometimes it fills in those conversations as well.
Julie, to add on the fact that we think we know what our customers want, doing this is going to help them realize that they might not know what they want. Number one, free to demonstrate that you're a partner with them, right? To get them to figure out what that is. And then you get to use those gold nuggets later on to help sell your services or business even more. So fantastic relationship building.
Completely. And these are the ones, actually, if you joined us for our building change communications, these is where you get the information to build the change communications for the future. So when they give you this feedback, you can start to pinpoint this and say, hey, you remember when you told me this? Like, here's what the answer is. Here's what we did with it. And it's always good to close those loops there. And then the last question that we have is, what are you getting that you don't use? So what are some things maybe that we thought were providing value that aren't necessarily valuable anymore? They maybe had value at one point in time, but maybe there's things that we can start to take down. Because a lot of times we keep adding more offerings, more services, more things to our role, but we don't often, it's not like a 1-for-1 where one comes in and then one service goes out. We just keep adding on and then we get exhausted. So that's typically why. It's good to ask the question of maybe what they're not using so we can better understand what we can stop. That leads us to the first tool today, and it's called a Kano model. And it's actually a model that's used more often in marketing. But I love using it in the continuous improvement world because it really helps me understand the criteria of what people are looking for. So we break it down into 3 different areas of basics, performances, and then like the exciters or delighters, I call them. Those are the wow factors that come out. And I often teach this with using a hotel as an example. So your basics when you walk into a hotel are to have a bed in there. You probably want your own bathroom. You probably want like a TV in there. Because I would imagine, Jen, if you walked into a hotel room and there was no bed in the hotel room, would you stay there? Probably
No.
not. Yeah, no, we'd be like, no way. No way. So those are like the basics. It doesn't matter what else you have. If we don't have the basics nailed down, it doesn't matter what else we do. It's kind of like that. You can't put the lipstick on a pig at that point. So the performances then are those things that maybe you may ask for, maybe not, but they are things that are beyond the basics that might add value for us. So my example of this one, when I go on the road for a couple days, like 3-4 days, even more than that, I always want to make sure that I'm going to a hotel that has its own refrigerator. Because if I'm going to go on the road for that long, I want to make sure that I can have like my own yogurt, my own fruit and stuff, and I can put it in my own refrigerator. Now, I will look for that on the hotel website. I might go search that out. It's not a basic requirement for me in most cases, but when I need it, that's when I'm going to go be looking for it. So that might be a performance in those cases. You might be searching for it. That excitement or that delighter is like when I go to the embassy suites in Chicago, and I walk into the room and my ice bucket is full and there's a Diet Coke and like a bag of chips in there. And it's like Christmas for me. I think it's like the best thing ever because the first thing I always do when I get to a hotel anyways is go get ice because I need like constant ice water. But the bucket's already filled and like that Diet Coke that's sitting there after I either drove or flew there is so welcome at the end of the day. It's absolutely wonderful. But again, that said, if I walked into the embassy, ice bucket's there, Diet Coke's there, no bed, I'm still walking out. I'm taking the ice bucket and the Diet Coke with me, but I'm not staying in that hotel at this point. So this is where we use this to help define that criteria. What's our wants versus needs? What's our basics, performances, and excitements to understand how much does this actually really matter to you? And in these cases, it might be different from person to person. So it's good to have that conversation because if you were to do this, let's say on what you wanted in a car or what you wanted in a house, what you might want might be different than maybe what your friend or your spouse or your kids want in those cases. And this helps spark that discussion as well to understand how important things are. The other aspect of this is that these also can change over time. So if you think about a hotel, I'm going to date myself again here, 20 years ago, if I stayed at a hotel that had 2 phone lines in it so that I could talk on the phone and connect my computer to the internet, I'm so old. That was that was an excitement factor for me because a basic was basically just having a line that I could connect my computer to use my dial-up. It was really great if it had 2 phone lines in there. Then over time, once they started getting wired internet, you had a Cat 5 cable in there. If it was free, that was a delighter. If you had a Cat 5 in there that you had to pay for, that was a performance. And if you had 2 phone lines now, that was a basic. Over time now, if you were to walk into a hotel and they didn't have Wi-Fi, you'd be like, what is this? And free Wi-Fi, that's even more like a basic almost at this point. You're kind of peeved if you've got to pay for it at this. So you think how that's gone from an excitement down to a performance, down to a basic over time. And then you don't see when they're building new hotels now, they're not running 2 lines into a room anymore. So that's something that they can take off because their users are not using those 2 lines anymore and they're taking those basics off over time. So it's interesting to see how that shift happens. So an example we have of this one was one that was a real life example for me. And this was a few years ago when I took a job that was about 40 minutes away from my home. And my husband and I weren't driving to work together anymore. And he was working from home 100% of the time already. And I was gone every day. And I'm the one who cooks dinner. And we were dealing with this issue of, okay, who's going to cook dinner? What are we going to do with this? What are our options? I said, all right, let's do our Kano model. Like, what are we looking for in this answer? So some basics of what we wanted from our dinner planning, whether it was meal kits or ordering out or me cooking or JP cooking or meal planning, whatever that was. We needed something that was quick, healthy, easy cleanup, tastes good, and that was filling. That was our basic category there. Those were the things that we had to have, the table stakes. In that middle aisle is that performances, which would be if the food was already prepped, meaning if it was chopped up and all you had to do is kind of dump stuff in a pot and stir it, that was great. That would be a performance. Sometimes I might be looking for that. If it had leftovers for lunch, which means that I didn't have to figure out a way to feed JP for lunch the next day, and he had leftovers, that was awesome too. If it stayed fresh, we oftentimes would order a meal kit and we didn't use it in time and it wouldn't be good by the time we were going to make it. So staying fresh was one of those things that was a performance there, because we could still use some of it, just maybe not all of it at that point. And then cost was a performance for us. It wasn't a driving factor, but it definitely had an influence on our decision making. And then those excitement factors, those things that we wouldn't even think to ask about, but was really cool once we started to experiment with this stuff. One is if it forced us to try something new, if it was a different type of cuisine, or maybe we haven't eaten it that way before. Trying us, like pushing us out of our comfort zone. If it had nutritional information, that was really great, because I love being able to look at the stats associated with it. If it fit into different diet types. So if my friends were coming over, if I needed a paleo meal, if I needed a Whole30 meal, if I could order some of that stuff so that I could accommodate their preferences as well. If it came with recipes, that was really cool too, because I didn't even think of that. Because if we found meals that I really, really liked, and I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to be able to repeat that. If it came with a recipe card, that was awesome. And then extra bonus points if it was something that we could both make. That was an excitement factor. So that's how we used our Kano model to go through and understand what did we have to have versus what would we like to have versus like, wow, I didn't even think about it in those cases. So this is a really good way to help lay out that criteria. This is the first step in essentially taking away some of that subjectivity.
Julie, a quick question, and you might answer it later on, but for those of the individuals on the call and those who watch it later on YouTube, if you think about like managers, right? Managing maybe, first frontline employees to directors to leaders of companies, what are some examples of business decisions or projects or initiatives that they use this on, just to kind of help connect the dots for them of when oh, I need to use that tomorrow at work?
Absolutely. I do have a slide on this at the end, but where's we can use this now? Just some examples for this. We've done this quite a bit actually in the last 6 months, helping people pick like vendor selection. What new system are they going to go with? What's the criteria that they have to have in their new talent management system, in their new time and attendance system, in their new transportation system that they're picking? What is the criteria? Because sometimes we can go into those demos and we see all of like the sparkles and fancy lights and we're like, oh, I need that. And you're like, okay, well, we really don't need that. That would be a great example. Maybe if you're looking at the candidate you want when you're in the hiring process. What's the criteria that you actually need? Basics, performance, excitements. What do you absolutely have to have in a candidate? What would be nice to have in a candidate? And what's that like, wow, I didn't even think about it. So if you've got a couple candidates you're picking between, this is also a really good tool to be able to do that. Or even solutions, any type of process improvement event we're doing, if you have multiple possible solutions you can choose from, this is always a good way to help figure that out as well. Yeah, good question. All right, so now we take that and we put it into another tool, and that is one of my favorites here called Pugh Concept Selection. This is actually a little bit more of a Six Sigma tool. They kind of teach it in that realm. But once I learned this one, I threw everything into a Pugh Concept Selection from that point on in my life. So I'm using this one all the time. Every major decision I think I've ever had to make in my life of what job I want, what house I buy, what car we bought, what dog am I going to get? It all went through a Pugh Concept Selection. So I could really understand what the criteria was. And I wasn't making decisions based on emotion. I wanted to make it based on process. So the Pugh Concept Selection really does help us narrow down that list of possible options for us, so possible potential options, to either a single option that you're picking from, or sometimes it helps us pick a hybrid solution. So maybe one thing that we weren't even thinking about, you can start to combine one or two solutions to kind of almost a la carte pick and choose the benefits in each of these cases. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not, but it can really help spark those discussions as well. I've got a really great example of it. And this is where I say no templates needed for it. All you need is a grid. So if you can work Excel or you have a piece of paper in front of you, this is all we need. So if you remember from our Kano model we did, in our pink here, I've got our basics, the quick, healthy, easy cleanup, tastes good, and it's got to be filling. In our green here, I've got our performances. That's our criteria here of our leftovers, cost, stays fresh, prepped. And then our excitements, I put in a few of something new, different diets, and that we both can make it. So that was my criteria that I was evaluating my different options on. And this is a real example. This is actually what we did in our house. So we know how to have fun here. So what we do with this is we had a couple of examples. Okay, how could we solve this problem? So one of the things was we could eat out every night. Another possible solution was to do meal kits like a HelloFresh or a Plated or a Blue Apron, just doing meal kits. Another option was for us to do more meal planning. So at the beginning of the week, laying out what we were having every single night, making sure we were prepping everything like on a Sunday, and everything was bought so that I didn't have to stop at the grocery store every night on my way home from dinner, which obviously requires a little bit more prep and planning. And then the last option was JP, my husband, cooking. Hopefully he's not listening to us, but he's not very good cook. So that would be one of the options that we had as well. That wasn't really an option, but we threw it out there anyways. Yes, Jen.
Next time I wanted that blank column to say completely outsourced.
Oh, true. Well, I think actually we had it in my original one. I ran out of room where I just said, I'm just allowing a cook to come in and do.
Yes.
It's been so nice.
That's my
I
dream.
love that. Right? So how we use this then is we take what we are doing today, like whatever your decision is today, whatever software system you're using, whatever the candidate position looks like today, whatever your process is today that you are dealing with, whatever car you're driving today, that is what we call your baseline or your benchmark. And that's what our first column is here. That's all those zeros there, because everything is going to be compared against what we are doing today. So how we use this then, it's basically a simple plus, minus, or zero system, where if I look at eating out, for example, from a quick perspective, is it quicker if I eat out or quicker if I eat at home, if I'm doing what I'm doing today? And I put a minus there because it's going to take us longer if we go eat out, because we have to drive out to wherever we're going. We probably have to sit down, order. It's going to take more of our time. So it isn't necessarily quicker than what I'm doing today. If I look at leftovers, maybe what I'm doing today doesn't have a ton of leftovers, but I know if I'm eating out, I'm always going to be bringing leftovers home. So that's a plus. And then if I look at something new, odds are if I'm going to be going out to a restaurant to go eat out, I'm probably not going to be that much more adventurous than what I would be cooking at home. So I call it a push. It's a zero there. So there's no difference than what I'm doing in that situation. So essentially all I'm doing here is I'm going through giving plus, minuses, or zeros when I'm comparing a solution or an option to what I'm doing today. So I did that with eating out, I did that with the meal kits, did that with the meal planning, and I did that with JP cooking. Poor guy has all these minuses here. I promise you, he does laundry. I'm not bagging on him. He does all of our laundry. So I don't want you to.
Yeah. I was going to say that earlier as a disclaimer. JP is amazing. So
he is. Love him to death and will not trade him in just because he can't cook. Not a big deal. So what I do with this then is after I fill all of this in, I go through and I add up all the pluses and minuses. So in this first column of eating out, it essentially was 5 pluses and 5 minuses, which net out to a 0. So it's not any better than what I was doing today based on the criteria I gave. Now, meal kits, on the other hand, I had 8 pluses and 0 minuses. So there was a big benefit to doing meal kits over what I was doing today. And meal planning also had a lot of different pluses. And you can see here, it's in different places where it had pluses and minuses than our meal kits did. It had 7 pluses, 1 minus, so a net of 6 in these cases. Poor JP, 4 pluses, 7 minuses, 3 minus there. So clearly worse than what we were doing today. So really, really not an option. So what I did with this then is I wanted to compare these two options because I didn't necessarily want to go all meal kit, and I didn't want to go like all in on meal planning either, because sometimes that can just be exhausting. So I wanted to look at the two options compared to each other, maybe just to see which one was better. So this is kind of like that second level of Pugh you can do then, and that's what's over here in the far right-hand corner. So I decided to take the meal kits and compare them against the meal plan. So I then made meal kits my benchmark. So that got all of my zeros in the column from start to finish. And then I went through and I compared, is the meal planning better, worse, or the same as having meal kits when it comes to quickness? Now, meal planning, if I'm prepping everything at the beginning of the week and I'm picking really easy meals, my guess is it's super quick because I'm going to have everything already done. So that might have an advantage over some of the meal kits, because some of the meal kits take a lot longer to be able to make, which is a little bit of a frustration of mine, where I can whip something up in 10 minutes, where sometimes a meal kit can take me like a half hour to do. And that's not really what I wanted to do at that point in time. So I went through and looked at each one of these. I know that my food is a little bit better than the meal kits, at least in my opinion. So that one got a plus. It was more filling because I could make more. I could control the portion size with my meal planning versus what I could get with my meal kits. So obviously that got us a plus as well. Now, from the aspect of what was better in the meal kits, sometimes that stuff came all chopped up and portioned off, and I didn't have to buy like an entire head of lettuce or celery, and it already came with just this little like one stock for you. So I gave that an advantage then to the meal kits and put the minus on the meal plan. Same thing with pushing me into trying something new, because sometimes you can't always pick like chicken on the meal kit, and it's forcing you to go try like a black bean burger, which I probably wouldn't have made at home. So that is a better push, or a better plus for our meal kits. So if you were to look at the two of them then, meal kits versus meal plans, we ended up with these numbers down here where I had 6 pluses, 3 minuses, which netted out a 3 plus. So if I were just going to strictly go with one answer, I likely would have gone down the meal planning route in this situation. However, this is where that hybrid solution can come into play, where I was like, you know what, they're almost the same. They're pretty similar in these cases. I want to do a mix of the two. So I might have pushed myself into a hybrid solution there, which I may not have thought about before. We actually did this earlier this week when we were talking with a client about screening vendors. And we were trying to make it a very binary decision. It was either going to be this vendor or this vendor. And I was like, hey, can we do 2 vendors in the system so that we can cover both geographical areas? And they're like, well, yeah, I didn't really even think about that. So I was like, okay, our new solution is then to have 2 vendors so that this one covers this geographic region, this one covers this geographic region. And it was a new option that we were picking in those cases because we were really hemming and hawing. So same thing we did with our meal plan. Now, one of the things to make this just slightly more complex, and this is once you get in and you get good at this, is you can start looking at weighting your basics, your performances, and your excitements here. So in this case, my pinks here, if you remember, were my basics. I'm going to multiply those pluses and minuses by 9. My performances, my greens, I'm going to multiply those by 3. And then my blues are my excitements. They don't get any multiplier at all because they're not as important. So you're essentially weighting the importance of your basics, your performances, and your excitements. So instead of just having the pluses and minuses here, I'm essentially multiplying by 9 or 3. So you can see in each of these examples, like meal kits, for example, here where I have a plus, that gets 9 points now. And then a plus in the green area in my performances gets a plus 3. The same thing can happen over here where I've got some minuses there on my basics. So that might be a minus 9 at that point. So you can see I added up the same way at the bottom, and it just changed my net outcome slightly. It didn't necessarily push one option over the other. But if you wanted to make sure, hey, I want to make sure our basics get more attention or more weight, you can certainly start multiplying using this method as well. It just makes it a little bit more complex. So what I would recommend you do is just start with the pluses, minuses, and zeros first, then go back and add in the multipliers in these cases. And you can do this pretty easily in Excel as well, and it can calculate it all out for you. So it didn't necessarily change anything in our decisions and what we were going to be doing for dinner. It still pushed us towards doing a meal kit or some meal planning there as well. So your question, Jen, where can I apply this? Anywhere. So software selections that you might be doing, vendor selections if you're picking, I mean, hopefully if you're picking between business consultants, you won't even have to do this. You just pick joint pivot and then it's not a problem, right? See, there we go. We don't even need this. So software selections, any solution that you're looking to put in place. So any type of continuous improvement project that you're running, anytime you have multiple solutions you can pick from, we can go down this route. Personnel choices, it's really great to be able to put that together, especially for roles and responsibilities. What type of candidate do you want? What are you really looking for? I've used this to pick out cars. In fact, this is one of my favorite things to do in training when we teach this one live, is to pick somebody in the class who is looking at new cars. And then we actually do the exercise. And every single time I have 100% record on this one, they've gone with the one that we've actually picked. Little dangerous, one of the times I taught this, the person already bought a car and didn't tell me. And we walked through the process and we still picked the right car. So I was like, whew, that was good to know. So houses is good. I know we've got somebody on the call here today who's actually used this to pick which house they wanted to rent or buy. So you can help make sure that the family maybe is involved in the criteria of what they want in a new house. Maybe it's vacations that you're trying to pick from, vacation spots you want to be able to go to. If you've got like the sister like I do who always got her way on where vacations were because she yelled the loudest, this would have been a really good tool in my family. Had I had it growing up, it would have been great. Or we've used this to pick where kids go to college, because sometimes us as parents have different criteria in what we're looking for in college, maybe than the kids have, and what their criteria is going to college. So this can help drive those conversations. So we have a little bit of information from both sides. We can pull that together and then help make a decision as a team instead of kind of making that heart or emotional decision all at once, if we're doing it that way. So really, anywhere you have multiple options to choose from, you can literally use this anywhere where you have all those choices to choose from. So it's a great tool, super simple to be able to go out there and identify it. You could even just drop a cute, quick one if you're trying to figure out where to go to dinner tonight. Write down what you're hungry for. What are you looking for? Fancy, not fancy, drive-through, whatever it is. Put some options across the top. You can fill out your Pugh Concept selection matrix, and then you're going to have your answer on where you need to go for dinner.
What are you doing this weekend, Julie?
I'm driving to Florida.
Oh, that's right. Lauren, for those of you who don't know, my 6-year-old has a 20-minute breakdown every morning picking out her clothes. They either aren't comfy enough, they're not fuzzy enough, the socks hurt her ankles, she doesn't like ankle socks, she doesn't want that. I mean, it is. So this weekend, we are going to go try every type of clothing out there. And I'm hoping to, I know I'm crazy, I'm hoping to get her into some sort of this or that. Oh, this. Okay, good. We're going to go with.
There you go. Oh, exactly. You got to find out what her criteria is. What are her basics, performances, and excitement when it comes to getting dressed in the morning? I can tell you, my criteria probably changed since I was working from home. No longer did dress actually factor high in my criteria. So,
nope.
Yeah, all sorts of fun stuff. So I hope everybody learned a lot today on this. Maybe we can help drive some of those decisions a little bit easier. It's always a good refresher and reminder if you knew this tool already on how we can actually use this moving forward. It makes decisions so easy. It's almost like I've got my magic wand here. You can wave your magic wand and have decisions made super easy. It's really, really great. If you have any questions, call us. We are happy to help walk you through this. Maybe it's just helping you set up your first one, and then you can continue to execute from there. So if you're like, oh, this is a little bit daunting, I don't necessarily know how to do this on my own, it can just be a quick hour consult. We can help you set this up, and then you guys can continue to execute it on your own, and we are out of there. So we taught you a new tool today. Mm-hmm. But we also have another great webinar coming up in November. Jen, tell us what you're going to be talking about in November.
It falls very well with this whole webinar, right? Kano and Pugh Concept. And this one is all about project selection or prioritizing your projects so you don't overburden your employees. You're not disappointed when the project launches and didn't meet expectations. You're not over budget, you're not over time, you're not just creating a bunch of chaos for no reason. We're going to help give you a couple questions to ask, why you should ask them. So when you want to pick out or prioritize your projects, you are very confident in them. And I also want to point out for leaders who I've been working with recently, I'm like, did you challenge anyone on this decision? Oh, Jen, I just didn't. These questions are going to give you the confidence to politely push back at people's agendas, silver bullets, bright, shiny lights, to actually kind of sometimes actually quantify it. So you're not just shoving a bunch of projects on your team members and watching them get frustrated, buried, and leave.
Yeah.
So it'll be a good
very,
one.
Very timely right now with a lot of companies putting together their strategic plans for next year and figuring out what projects they're going to be working on, what resources they need. Now is the time so that you don't have crickets when you're going through those calls.
Right. Let's just do more then.
Right, exactly. No, let's not. So sign up on the website. We also will have a link in our October pivot points, which will be coming out this week. So head on over to the website, sign up for the webinar in November to listen to Jen give us all of her secrets on setting us up for success. Obviously, if you found this webinar great and you want to share this with other people too, this will be up on our YouTube channel. So come check us out there as well. So thank you, everyone. I hope you guys all have a great afternoon. And you guys can go make decisions easy. You can crush decisions now. They don't have to be crippling any longer. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.